Number 10. Cyclops. While Cyclops might not be as powerful as some of the others on this list, he pretty much perfectly sums up the idea of a hero who has to hold back his power in order to fight. I mean, that's literally what his costume is for, really. Well, other than that sweet X-Men suit. That is just so we know what team he's fighting alongside. But when it comes to his visor, that is straight up being used to better control and restrain his powers, so that he isn't just optic blasting everyone he looks at or comes up against into next week. Additionally, Cyclops doesn't just use his visor, but also uses his gloves to do this. In his gloves are little buttons that Cyclops can basically push to control the visor, allowing him to open it more or less and change the angle at which it will emit his optic blasts. This is also why Cyclops is known as a master of trigonometry. He needs this knowledge so that he can best utilize his optic blasts, knowing exactly how and when to fire them, and with how much intensity in order to achieve whatever the fight calls for. So whether it's a giant full frontal blast or something a little bit more subtle, Cyclops is always prepared for each and every occasion, as long as he has his trig knowledge intact and his visor and his gloves with him. Since the character first debuted, his powers and their immense strength are something that have also been shown as bothering and plaguing this character, with him even believing that Jean could actually never love him because of his uncontrollable optic blasts. How could she ever love me? I have to wear rose quartz glasses all the time. It's not that big of a deal, psych. Just chill. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button? Number 9. Starfire. Starfire is a character who is immensely powerful, and honestly, we don't talk about her enough on this channel. It's been a minute since we talked about Corey, but let's get into it. The Teen Titans in general are an immensely powerful team, and now that they're no longer teens and are fully grown adults, being known simply as the Titans, they're even more powerful than they once were. Being in control of superpowers as an adult superhero is really, I think, all about knowing when to hold back. Over time, characters have a tendency to only get more powerful and more experienced with age, and Starfire is no exception. In the comics, even pre-Flashpoint Starfire in a fight against Blackfire acknowledges that she is indeed her sister's equal in terms of her power and prowess, saying that the only reason that she has not beaten her sister is because they have never fought as equals, despite being equal to one another. And her sister responds by saying that due to Starfire's caring nature, Corey often holds back, which is basically her weakness. At least, that's how Blackfire sees it. While Blackfire might see this as a weakness, I'm sure Starfire would actually see it as a strength, as it is also what makes her a hero. Sometimes in order to be a hero, you have to know when to restrain yourself, you know what I mean?
Number 8. Hyperion. Marcus Milton was sent to Earth 13,034 as a baby from a dying world of Eternals, where he was raised by a human father who taught him the morals of society. When he grew up, he became the superhero known as Hyperion and joined the super team Squadron Supreme. When his universe and another were colliding, Hyperion tried to prevent his universe's destruction, but failed and was left floating in nothingness until AIM scientists on Earth 616 pulled him into their reality and took him prisoner. He was eventually freed by the Avengers, who he then joined. Hyperion is a ripoff of Superman, whose powers come from the sun. As such, he has a very similar power set, being nearly invulnerable, having super strength, speed, stamina, and the ability to fly and shoot atomic energy from his eyes. Like Superman, he has to be extremely cautious due to his amazing strength, as he could easily destroy the planet if he lets loose too much. Unlike Superman, he has cut loose in a violent way before, such as when he plucked Atlantis from the sea and threw it to the ground, thus destroying it. But he felt bad later, so it's okay. Number 7. Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers is the half-human, half-Kree warrior who joined the Air Force before joining NASA. She discovered her powers and became a superhero, operating under various different aliases such as Miss Marvel, Binary, and Warbird, before eventually taking up the mantle of her dead love, Captain Marvel. She is an extremely powerful hero who has been a member of the Avengers, an honorary X-Man, a Starjammer, and the leader of the Alpha Flight space program. Captain Marvel has all the classic powers powers such as super strength, durability, and flight, but also has a few extra ones, such as the ability to shoot photon beams and the ability to transmute matter in order to reshape it into anything she wants. She is yet another example of a hero so powerful that they have to be sure to restrain themselves in order to not accidentally kill everyone on the planet. Number 6, Rogue. Perhaps the most obvious choice for a spot on this list, and one that it's frankly kind of embarrassing none of us thought to put in any of the previous 3 videos on this subject, is Rogue. Anna Marie has the mutant power to absorb people's energies through touch, which temporarily grants her their abilities, powers, and memories, and causes her victims to be weakened. She once attacked Carol Danvers, and as a result, permanently ended up with her powers of super strength and flight. She started out as a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants before eventually joining the X-Men. Although her powers can be useful in a combat setting, it can really mess with your personal life when you can't touch anyone you care about without hurting them. So, most of the time, Rogue holds back her powers by wearing gloves for the safety of those around her. Number 5, Storm. Aurora Monroe is descended from a long line of African priestesses who all have white hair and the potential to use magic. Her mother was a princess who married an American photojournalist and moved with him to Manhattan, where Storm was born. They moved to Cairo when she was 6 months old, but when she was 5, her parents were killed, leaving her an orphan. She lived as a thief for a while before eventually making her way to Kenya, where her weather-controlling powers made her be worshipped as a goddess. She is connected to Earth's weather patterns, and as a result, her emotions can result in unstable weather. If she gets mad, she could start a tornado, for example. Therefore, she has to be careful to keep her powers in check, lest she accidentally cause a natural disaster. Following the death of Wolverine, Storm had Beast take her into space so she could safely vent her emotions, and she still ended up igniting Earth's atmosphere, causing an aurora borealis effect across the entire planet. Number 4, Ghost Rider. Johnny Blaze is a motorcycle stuntman who, in an effort to save his surrogate father, Crash Simpson, from dying of cancer, made a deal with the demon Mephisto. Mephisto promised to cure Crash's cancer in exchange for Johnny's service. Unfortunately, Crash perished in a stunt gone wrong almost immediately afterwards, and Johnny became Ghost Rider, becoming bound to the spirit of vengeance, Zarathos. When transformed into the Rider, he has super strength, is essentially immune to damage, and can manipulate hellfire. Perhaps most iconic is his penance stare, which causes its victims to experience every bit of pain that they have ever inflicted on other people, resulting in guilt, pain, and trauma. Ghost Rider is extremely powerful, but Zarathos tends to want to go really all out on his quest for vengeance, and Johnny often has to hold him back to prevent him from going too far. Number 3, Iceman. Bobby Drake is a mutant whose powers were first revealed when he was attacked by a group of school bullies and he was forced to freeze their leader into a block of ice. An angry mob showed up at his home planning to execute Bobby, but he was saved by Cyclops and Professor X, and he was invited to join the X-Men. His powers include the ability to become organic ice. He can also generate ice, snow, and cold temperature using the moisture in the air. This is actually more powerful than you might initially think, allowing Bobby to freeze the Earth in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3, number 64. He is an Omega-level mutant who holds back from using the full extent of his powers as he fears that he could be dangerous. Professor X once said that Iceman has the potential to destroy the planet if he's not careful, and for a time, Bobby was known to wear a special power belt which helped him keep his powers under control. Number 2, the Human Torch. When Johnny Storm was exposed to cosmic rays while on a space exploration mission with his sister Sue, Reed Richards, and Ben Grimm, he was transformed into the Human Torch, and the group became Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four. As the Human Torch, Johnny is capable of controlling ambient heat and transforming into a fiery plasma. He can sculpt and throw flames with his pyrokinesis and is able to fly. Most relevant to this list is his Nova Flame, which happens when the torch reaches his hottest temperature and expels it 900 feet around him at a temperature of 1 million degrees Fahrenheit. This makes him about as hot as a nuclear warhead, and if he did this in a populated area, it could result in several deaths. He has stated that this power has the ability to destroy a small moon. He also has to hold back so that he doesn't burn up the Earth's atmosphere, killing everyone on the planet. Number 1, Supergirl. Kara Zor-El is Superman's cousin. When the planet Krypton was destroyed, Kara's home, Argo City, was spared thanks to the efforts of her father, although due to radiation the city was slowly turning to kryptonite. dynamite. When the city was deemed past the point of no return, her father pulled a page out of his brother's book and built a rocket, sending Kara to Earth. She became Supergirl and was placed in an orphanage by Superman as part of her cover, although she was eventually adopted by the Danvers family. Supergirl has all of the same powers as Superman, such as flight, super strength, speed, hearing, invulnerability, as well as X-ray and heat vision. As someone with the same powers as Superman, Supergirl has to hold back when she fights villains, or even just interacts with people in general, in order to make sure that she doesn't reduce anyone she comes into contact with into a fine red mist. She is slightly less powerful than her cousin, but there was a period where she became a member of the Red Lantern Corps, giving her both the powers of a Kryptonian and a lantern to try and have to control. Number 10. Sleaze. Sleaze was originally Darkseid's right-hand man as the new god began accumulating more and more power on the planet Apokolips. Eventually, Darkseid grew tired of Sleaze's depravity and banished him to Earth using his Omega beams for the very first time. He was stranded on Earth for hundreds of years, making a home for himself in the sewers underneath a slum in Metropolis. Despite not having done much during his many years on Earth, he is actually extremely powerful, being able to dominate the minds of others. He could use these powers to control the governments of Earth or install himself as a ruler, but he refrains from using his powers to their full potential, deciding to instead use them for relatively small-scale crimes. For example, in his first appearance in Action Comics number 592, he uses his mind control power to kidnap Big Barda, forcing her to star in adult films that he sells to a local producer. When Superman shows up to stop him, he manages to bring Superman under his control as well. What does he do with the opportunity most villains could only dream of? Having the Man of Steel himself as a mind-controlled servant? Does he rob banks? Does he make Superman knock down buildings? No. In the next issue, he just tries to make another video starring Superman and Big Barda. Fortunately, Barda's husband, Mr. Miracle, stops his scheme before things get too spicy, but it's lucky Sleaze lacked either the ambition or the imagination to use a mind-controlled Superman to his full potential. Number 9. Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is of course the arch-enemy of Superman, who is both a genius inventor and a ruthless billionaire who moonlights as one of the most dangerous supervillains in the DC universe. Lex doesn't have superpowers in the traditional sense, but he is so intelligent that it is essentially a superpower that has allowed him to come up with everything from his battlesuit to the cure for cancer. Now, if his only goal was to take over the world, he probably could, but he has to hold back on this to a certain extent, as he is also obsessed with maintaining his public image. If Lex were to own the fact that he's a supervillain and just go ham, he could probably be very effective at it, but all of his plans end up taking a lot longer than they have to because he has to make sure that he can't be linked to them and that his reputation stays intact. On the one hand, this is practical, as he certainly doesn't want to end up in prison if he's stopped, but on the other hand, if it weren't for his pathological need to be beloved by humanity, he could save himself a lot of effort. On the other hand, if he chose to put his brain towards good, he probably would be one of the most beloved minds on the planet, but his greed and lust for power prevents him from reaching his full potential on that front as well.
Number 8. Gentle. Gentle is such a great mutant hero, one we honestly do not talk enough about. His power is so great that it's believed using it could actually result in him losing his life. As a result, Gentle was given vibranium tattoos, which allow him to better contain and control his powers. His powers grant him augmented strength. Despite his mutant name, Gentle can actually become insanely muscular, increasing in size and mass, and we don't actually know the limits of his powers yet, which is why they're also so dangerous. Using them is also really hard on Nesno's body, which could result in his death. Gentle is a hero who, while also a citizen of Krakoa now, is also known for his Wakandan heritage, being actually part Wakandan and part Russian based on his parents' heritage. Initially, it was believed that using his power also caused him great pain and actually resulted in seizures, but we later learned that this was actually more psychological. The vibranium tattoos were therefore helpful for him in regards to using his powers, but were also helpful in the way that they seemed to help lessen his pain. Gentle was also recently a candidate for the X-Men, and one of the mutants you could vote to have elected to the team. He didn't get chosen, but I honestly hope he does get to join the main team in the future, as he's a really neat and unique hero and character. Number 7. The Flash. The Flash might seem like a weird pick for this list, especially as up to this point we've mostly been focusing on characters who have something physical or mental that forces them to hold back their power set. But with the Flash, it's actually all about how powerful he is. He is, I would say, too powerful, which is the issue, especially in regards to his ability to time travel. While Barry Allen as the Flash has traveled back in time and changed things only to learn afterwards of how this was kind of an awful mistake, upturning the entire universe as a result of the change he'd made to basically save his mother, Wally West has seemingly learned from his predecessor's mistakes. For that reason, Wally actually prefers not to get involved when it comes to time travel. He knows that to do so could possibly break the universe, and so has a tendency to be more reserved and much more careful when it comes to racing through the time stream. And even when his friend Hunter Zolomon had begged Wally to use his power to help reverse his paralysis by traveling back in time to prevent it, Wally actually refused. This is what prompted Hunter to become the villain known as Zoom, believing that Wally simply wouldn't help him because he'd just not known enough tragedy in his life, as Hunter had. Zoom believed that in order to make Wally as the Flash a better hero, he would actually have to make him suffer. Number 6. Hellstrom. Hellstrom is actually someone who is similar to another character on this list in regards to his heritage, although the other character I'm comparing him to here is actually not from Marvel, but stay tuned for more on that. Because this point is all about Damon Hellstrom, or Hellstorm, depending on his persona and his mood. Hellstrom is said to be the son of Satan, although it is unknown up to this point if his father is really the true devil or just one of the many demons posing as the devil in the Marvel Universe, including Damon's father, as well as Azazel, who is Nightcrawler's father, and Mephisto, who isn't really known for being a father, but did once have a son named Blackheart. That is a thing that happened, and Blackheart did try to usurp him, so, you know. Hellstrom, as such, has two different personas within him, one that is inherently more good and heroic, and another that is straight up or on the verge of being evil, more influenced by his father's heritage. Sometimes these two personas are kind of given different names as well, Hellstrom or Hellstorm, depending on which persona he is leaning more towards at the time. Sometimes Hellstrom is actually only spelled with one L, and other times he's used these names to sort of like protect his identity, although they are both super similar, so I don't really fully understand how that's supposed to fool anyone. Hellstrom has often struggled with unleashing the full force of his power, and sometimes, in fact I would say often, regrets its ties to hell and the darkness that lies within him. Number 5. Shazam. Shazam, or Captain Marvel as some still refer to him today, is one of the most powerful heroes DC has, and in fact some would argue that when it comes to his fights and contests with Superman, it is he, not Superman, who is often the one who would need to hold back. This is because Shazam's powers come from the gods, and some actually say this is because his powers are kind of magical. The limitless wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, stamina of Atlas, power and omnipotence of Zeus, courage of Achilles, and speed of Mercury. There is really no limit, or there shouldn't be, to what he can do, and it is because of this sheer power and strength that Shazam often needs to hold back when fighting against his enemies as well. You could also add in the fact that it is Billy Batson's kind heart that often encourages him to hold back against his enemies, preferring to not be so brutal with his enemies or his opponents. I mean, especially if they are his friends or people he looks up to, because, you know, even heroes sometimes fight each other, like in a fight against Supes. At one point, Superman even played host to Captain Marvel and actually marveled at his sheer power. So, you know you're probably going to need to hold back when you're like wowing Superman with your power levels. Number 4. Blue Marvel. If you are powerful enough to knock out Hulk and live to tell the tale, even if he possibly is maybe a less stronger version of the Hulk from the Ultimate Universe, then you probably need to rein in your powers almost all the time. Blue Marvel's powers come from him being a scientist and being forever changed by an experiment gone wrong. Adam Brashear was the project lead on an experimental attempt to manipulate and utilize antimatter. When the negative reactor exploded, it transformed Adam into, in essence, what he was trying to create. He became an antimatter reactor, harnessing antimatter, which basically powered his amazing newfound abilities. Number 3. Superman. I mean, Superman is one of the strongest superheroes DC has to offer. He packs a mean punch, and I mean a mean punch. He often holds back, and not just in regards to strength and holding back actual force, but also in terms of his morality. Superman has a very strong moral code. He won't even hit someone in the back if their back is turned to him. That's how passionate he is about fighting fair. He doesn't hit his opponents when they're down, and he doesn't kill, even though he could very easily permanently defeat his opponents by just straight up ending them. This just isn't Superman's style, and honestly, it's what most people love and respect about Superman. To use his power to annihilate his opponents would actually kind of be sinking to their level. In fact, in realities where he has chosen not to hold back, like Injustice, where he brutally murders the Joker in response to him destroying Metropolis, killing his BFF Jimmy Olsen, and manipulating Superman into killing Lois, Clark becomes a straight up villain and a brutal dictator, which is why he chooses to hold back more often than not in the comics, because he is aware of how power can easily corrupt people. I mean, to be honest, a lot of his villains are people who allow themselves to become corrupted by great power, whether or not they're aware of that. Number 2. Hulk. To say that the Hulk is the strongest there is really not an overstatement. Not only the strongest, but also just one of the most indestructible heroes out there. After all, Hulk is also now immortal, and kinda has been the whole time. And as a result of this, is a character that you do not want to face in a fight. The good news is that Hulk typically doesn't want to kill people, and so he generally does hold back in fights, unless he's going up against someone, that's just about as indestructible as he is. Like, he might not hold back as much when he's fighting someone like the Thing. There are a few reasons that this happens when it comes to Hulk holding back. One, Hulk has actually exhibited he himself has morals. Not all Hulk personas are like this. I mean, look at his alternate version, Maestro, from the future. This version of the Hulk is more devoid of morals and is therefore willing to use all of his strength and power to devastating degrees. The other reason Hulk is often holding back actually has to do with the other persona that's in there with him at the time, Bruce Banner. It's been alluded to before that Bruce can act at times like the Hulk's conscience, but then again, it's also been suggested that Hulk actually might be Bruce's conscience, so kinda depends on the story you're reading as to who is the more heroic between those two personas. Number 1. Raven. Raven is another character that basically sums up the idea of a person who has to hold back and really has no choice in that matter. I mean, we've seen what happens when Raven fully lets go, and it's deadly. Raven in general has to hold back her power in regards to letting herself be fueled by emotion, which is why she generally remains extremely detached. Which also makes her a great counterbalance to someone like Starfire on the Teen Titans team. While Starfire's issue when it comes to holding back is that she has too much emotion, too much empathy for those around her, Raven often prefers to stay closed off from those emotions, knowing that with them could come great power, but at the risk of easily losing control. This is a huge issue for Raven considering her heritage. Raven is related to the demon Trigon, who is immensely powerful and is a version of Satan in essence in the DC universe. While Trigon is her father, he is also her arch nemesis, which means she has to be careful when it comes to possibly opening herself up to his influence at all, as it can and has in the past turned Raven into an extremely dangerous and powerful supervillain. One that could literally end worlds, so.
Number 10. The Joker. The Joker. How the heck does the Joker hold back? He normally doesn't really. There are plenty of occasions where the Joker lets loose and does whatever he wants, taking lives indiscriminately, but that just makes it all the more incredibly villainous when instead he restrains his insane sadistic impulses in order to carry out a completely bonkers plan. There are plenty of instances where instead of straight up taking someone's life, the Joker will toy with them or leave them on their last legs or completely break down their character, usually for the purpose of manipulating the individual themselves, their close family members, or more often than not, to torment the Batman himself directly. When he completely messed up Barbara Gordon for the purpose of trying to break Commissioner Gordon, or in Death of the Family when he made the entire Bat family believe that he had sliced off their faces when he actually hadn't. Even the whole thing with Jason Todd, he didn't just take down the Robin, he left him on the brink of the afterlife and rigged an explosion just so Batman could almost save him. Yeah, I mean, so far so good, Adam. Hard to say if this is restraint or if it's just his version of comedic timing, but we're off to a good start. Number 9, Mr. Mixio Spitlick. Mr. Mixio Spitlick here is probably the best example of someone who is technically a villain and who has no choice but to hold back. If you want to see just how powerful this 5th dimensional imp actually is, all you have to do is read the Emperor Joker story, where his powers are granted to someone who totally shouldn't have them, the Joker. Using this power, Joker eventually causes the end of everything. But Mr. Mixio Spitlick? He mainly just uses his abilities to be a pain in the butt and prove that he is smarter than Superman, his favorite superhero. I mean, there's a large case to be made that Mr. Mixio Spitlick isn't even a villain at all. The point here is that this imp has the power to completely destroy everything we hold dear, but he knows that, and he has to keep his power in check to make sure that that doesn't happen. He's a villain, but that doesn't mean he isn't responsible. A great choice. What Adam doesn't mention is that Mr. Mixio Spitlick is so overpowered that he actually has given himself a weakness to make things more interesting. That being that he will return to his own dimension if you can trick him into saying his name backwards. Kiltip Sixum. Number 8. Black Adam. Teth Adam was a member of the Kandaki tribe in ancient Egypt whose people were forced into servitude by a cruel pharaoh of the time. Most of his family was killed, but Teth Adam was able to escape with his nephew Amen when the wizard Shazam brought them to the Rock of Eternity to make Amen his latest champion. Amen learned that he could share his powers with Adam, and the two returned to free their people. Amen wanted to find a peaceful solution, but Adam felt that peace was not an option and wanted revenge. So he killed Amen in order to gain his power for his own. In the present day of the DC universe, he is the ruler of Kondak and sometimes a member of super teams like the Justice Society. He kind of flip-flops between being an anti-hero and a straight-up villain. His enchantment from the wizard Shazam has granted him the strength of Shu, the speed of Horus, the strength of Amen, the wisdom of Zahudi, the power of Aten, and the courage of Mehen. This gives him super strength, speed, flight, and lightning casting abilities that make him capable of taking down most of the heroes of the DC universe with ease. Despite this, he doesn't usually go in on the whole conquest thing and sticks to his home country. This is due to a deal he made with the Justice Society that says that they won't interfere with his rule if he promises not to expand his borders. It's a good thing he mostly sticks to this, as when he did decide to cut loose and start World War III, he was a menace to stop and was responsible for the death of millions of innocent lives. Number 7. Magneto. When Max Eisenhardt was a young man in Germany, he was subjected to many atrocities at the hands of the Third Reich, who sent him to Auschwitz for no reason other than being Jewish. He eventually escaped and became known as Erich Lenscher. He discovered that he had the ability to control the powers of magnetism, and after the war, used them to track down former German soldiers. He developed the belief that mutants and humanity could not coexist and became Magneto, a mutant dedicated to mutant superiority and the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He is what is known as an Omega-level mutant, being capable of amazing feats such as defeating the Avengers by himself, taking control of the Earth's satellites to hold it hostage, and causing a massive EMP that shut down all technology on Earth. But because his goal is to make the world a better place for mutants, he can't use his full powers, which could destroy the entire planet. In the Ultimate Universe, Magneto reversed Earth's magnetic poles and caused a massive tidal wave that destroyed most of the heroes of the Ultimate Marvel Universe, as well as countless civilians. Let's hope his regular 616 counterpart doesn't feel the need to go down this route anytime soon. Number 6. Brainiac. Brainiac is a complicated villain whose goals change depending on which version of the character you're looking at. Originally, he was an alien whose goal was to kidnap cities so that he could repopulate his home planet, but this was eventually retconned so that he was trying to collect as much knowledge as possible so that he could become the smartest being in the universe. Part of how he achieves this is to go from planet to planet in his skull-shaped ship so that he can steal a city, which he then puts in a bottle for further study before sabotaging that planet's sun so that the planet will be destroyed, making him the sole owner of the information. What I find relevant for this list is that destroying the planet is the easy part for him. What tends to take the most time is getting the city bottled and shrunk. He achieves this with an army of robots and a special shrinking beam, but it does take time, usually enough that Superman is able to stop him. So Brainiac could destroy the planet without getting particularly close and wipe out all of its population, but as he needs a sample to study, he is forced to go through more complicated and elaborate means to accomplish his ultimate goal. Number 5. Orphan Maker. When a mutant named Peter was taken from an orphanage run by Mr. Sinister by a mutant named Nanny, he was fitted with a battle suit that made him impervious to most types of damage. Him and Nanny go about a twisted scheme of saving mutants by taking them from their non-mutant parents, who Peter then takes out, earning himself the nickname Orphan Maker. The battle suit makes him an incredibly powerful foe, but also acts as a power dampener for his as of yet unrevealed powers. However, Nanny has stated that his power is world-ending, and if unleashed would leave no survivors on the planet. So whatever he's holding back, it must be pretty powerful. I honestly couldn't find much info on his potential powers, but if you know something I don't, please let us know in the comments below. Number 4. Lucifer. Lucifer is of course a fallen angel who rules hell. He ruled hell for over 10 billion years, growing tired of the various stereotypes that mortals had come up with about him, claiming that he stirred evil in their hearts and bought and traded souls, all of which were untrue as he simply punished the souls who ended up in his realm. He eventually chose to leave, banishing all the souls and handing the keys over to Sandman and going to Earth to open a bar. He is still evil, I mean he is the devil, and he has an incredible amount of power, being immortal and nigh omnipotent, and being able to manipulate reality at will. Something interesting about him though is that he chooses to always keep his word and never lie. This isn't some weird rule that he's forced to follow, he just has a specific code of honor that he chooses to stick to. So even though there have been times where he's been tricked by characters like John Constantine and could just not honor any agreements and kill him, Lucifer chooses to keep his promises. Number 3. Galactus. Galactus is an incredibly powerful cosmic being who travels the galaxy, consuming energy-rich planets in order to sustain himself. For thousands of years he did this himself, consuming every planet he came across until eventually he came to the planet Zenla, where he met Norrin Radd. Radd spoke with Galactus and pointed out that traveling the universe searching for planets was using up a lot of the energy that he was getting out of eating the planets. Galactus admitted that this was a less than ideal situation and agreed to spare Norrin's planet if he would become his herald, finding planets on his behalf and then essentially ringing the dinner bell. Norrin became the Silver Surfer and served Galactus for many years. So, while Galactus is capable of using his own powers to find the planets, he holds back and lets his heralds do the task for him, as if he cannot find a planet to consume and runs out of energy, he risks death. Number 2. Aries. Aries is the god of war and frequently tangles with Wonder Woman, being the main villain in her first feature film. In current continuity, he's a lot more chill and actually works with Diana a lot of the time, but we're going off of the new Earth continuity for this one. Aries gains his power from conflict on Earth, often stoking the flames of aggression to get people or countries to go to war. The more intense the war, the more powerful he becomes. However, he is in the difficult position of having to keep people in conflict without letting the conflict reach too much of a boiling point. For example, if he helped start a third world war, that would be really good for him, but if that war escalated to the point where the planet wiped itself out, it would be really bad for him, as there wouldn't be enough conflict to sustain his power. This means that he has to hold back so that he can hit that sweet spot of conflict in the world. Number 1. The Beyonder. The Beyonder is an ancient being from a race known as the Beyonders who exist on a plane of existence beyond the limits of our known universe. When he was accidentally taken to Earth by a group of supervillains using a tachyon beam, he became curious about Earth and decided to stay as an observer to learn more about humanity. He became interested in humans' tendency to be constantly searching for meaning, something foreign to him as he thought he was everything in the universe. When he discovered that this was not the case, he developed an existential crisis of his own and decided to search for meaning by starting the Secret Wars, where he transported the heroes and villains to Battleworld to make them fight. Among his many powers is the ability to manipulate reality, and once took over the entire Earth with a mere thought. He can also erase the memories of everyone on Earth so that they forget meeting him. He could potentially end the planet with a thought, but holds back as he is still trying to learn about both himself and humanity. He has since been made less powerful than he was in his initial appearances, but in his original form, he could easily have been the end of the Marvel Universe if that had been conducive to his goals.
Number 10. Daredevil. When Matt Murdock was a child, he was hit by a truck that was carrying toxic radioactive isotopes. He got some gunk in his eyes, and as a result, he was blinded. But this being Marvel Comics, the radiation heightened his other senses to the point that he was given his trademark radar sense, which allows him to do sick flips and fight crime as Daredevil. Daredevil is quite a religious fellow who also believes in letting the legal system do its work as much as possible, so he has a pretty strict stance against killing people, believing that the criminals he fights should be taken to prison and left alive. This has put him at odds with other more lethal characters like the Punisher, who thinks that the only good criminal is a dead criminal. But despite the fact that he is often tempted, Daredevil holds back, using his ninja skills to brutalize and maim, but not to kill. This self-imposed rule has been broken a couple times, such as when he was possessed by a demon, when he was forced to shoot a helicopter pilot who was using a minigun to brutalize Hell's Kitchen, and when he attempted to shoot the Punisher, when Frank had tied him up and taped a gun to his hand. But once again, these are pretty extreme situations where he didn't really have any other options. Number 9, Professor X. Charles Xavier is the leader of the X-Men and the founder of a school for gifted youngsters where he trains young mutants to control their powers so that they don't accidentally destroy buildings on the regular. He is an extremely powerful mutant, being able to read and control people's minds. In theory, he could force anyone to do pretty much anything he wants. Thankfully, Xavier shows a decent amount of restraint with his powers, and usually makes a point of not reading his students' minds without permission, and rarely using them to make people act against their nature. For example, considering that governments in the Marvel Universe are consistently passing anti-mutant legislation, it would be very tempting to control the responsible politicians' minds to force them not to vote for such measures. But he doesn't do stuff like that. Sure, he has a bit of a god complex, and has a history of wiping people's minds when he screws up, or dampening Jean Grey's powers until he feels she's ready for them. But overall, he shows a lot of restraint. Outside the comics, in the X-Men 2 movie, we even see that while using Cerebro, Professor X could kill every mutant or human in existence simply by concentrating. So, yeah, he's holding back.
Number 8, Impossible Man. First appearing in Fantastic Four number 11 all the way back in 1962, Impossible Man is an alien from the planet Papa. The planet Papa is an extremely dangerous place, so its inhabitants evolved to be able to transform into anything their imagination could create. The Fantastic Four first came into contact with the Impossible Man when he went to Earth for a vacation and decided to annoy Marvel's first family. Like Mixio Spitlick, he's less concerned with causing harm than he is with having fun at the expense of the heroes, which is good because his transforming abilities have let him go up against several heavy hitters in the Marvel Universe, once knocking the Thing through a wall by transforming his arm into Thor's hammer, and another time getting punched in the face by the Hulk without getting hurt. In one of the most extreme instances of his power, he transformed his entire planet into a duplicate of Earth and tricked Galactus into eating it, causing the Planet Eater to develop a terminal case of indigestion. With power levels like that, it is a good thing he doesn't really go in for planet conquering, because he would be a tough villain to deal with. Not sure if I'd rank him above Mixio Spitlick, but they do seem to have a similar deal going on. Number 7, Molecule Man. Owen Reese was an ordinary lab technician who was repairing an atomic device and was caught in an accident that granted him incredible powers. This was actually a part of a plan by the Beyonders to end the universe, but for simplicity's sake, we're just gonna stick with the basics. He was granted the ability to control matter and energy, but due to a lack of confidence, was unaware of the true extent of his power. He originally thought that he had to be using a metal wand to manipulate matter, and also was under the impression that he could only control inorganic matter, but both were actually untrue. He was actually so powerful that the Watcher captured him, believing that he was too dangerous and could potentially destroy the universe. He eventually came back to Earth by reconstructing his body, and for a time was one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe once Dr. Doom helped him realize his true potential. He went toe-to-toe with the Beyonder and helped save the universe and Secret Wars 2. He became less outright villainous as the years went on, with him struggling to overcome madness and be a better person, but at the height of his villainy, it's a good thing that he was unconsciously holding himself back, as he was capable of ending universes with a thought if he wanted to. I wasn't very familiar with Molecule Man, but if all this is true, he feels a bit low on this list. Number 6. Loki. Loki is a god. As such, they have an Asgardian frost giant physiology, which makes them much more powerful than other beings. Loki's also incredibly adept with sorcery, being able to use it to do a whole wide array of different things and grant himself a whole whack of powers. He became the Sorcerer Supreme at one point. Whether it was by his own skill or a trick doesn't matter, he still did it. He's taken on the OG Avengers when they first formed and is just an incredibly powerful guy. But kind of like the Joker, Loki's a planner. His whole thing is tricking people and laying long convoluted plans to give pretty much everyone a bad time. Which means instead of just totally destroying people, which he could do, he toys with people, leads them on, pretends to be their friend, and adds just a whole bunch of not so necessary extra steps into his plans, all for his own entertainment. On a personal note, I recently read the X-Men Alpha Flight crossover from 1985, where Loki grants the humans and the mutants the power to make the world a utopia. He takes away this power and attacks them when the heroes refuse it, but it does prove that Loki could fix all of Earth's problems by himself if he wanted to. He just chooses not to. Number 5. Thanos. This one is pretty simple. Thanos on his own is incredibly powerful, able to be a threat for the Avengers any day of the week. But during his most famous story, where he assembles the Infinity Gems into the Infinity Gauntlet to grant himself the power to do essentially anything, his main goal was to destroy half the life in the universe to impress his girlfriend, Death. He could have done almost anything, and instead of really fully committing, he chose to only bring down half the universe. Half? No man, if you wanted to impress that girl, you gotta give 100%. Thanos did a half measure. What kind of villain does that? Lame. Moving on. So the reason Thanos didn't wipe out all life is because if he did, Death would have become redundant and have no purpose. But Adam is absolutely right. Thanos held back a lot by not killing every living being in the universe. Number 4. Doctor Doom. I don't know if I'd say Doctor Doom holds back his power. I think a better explanation would be that he chooses his time to strike. And personally, or rather Adam, thinks that this is because he just wants to use the least amount of effort possible when he engages in battle. Now, this is obviously not always true. We've seen Doom completely obliterate his opponents on multiple occasions, and he has become the most powerful person in the universe on multiple occasions, using that massive power to do whatever the heck he wants. But let's think about all the times that Doom doesn't actually have to use his power. How many times have we seen Doom just sit on his throne without having to do anything because people know better than to cross him? So many times. His power speaks for itself, and so he doesn't really have to use all of it. Simple as that. But okay, let's think of an example. When his master, the Marquis of Death, came and judged him, Doom got sent all the way back to be swallowed by a megalodon. He had his heart turned to stone and his blood into acid, and not only did he survive, he managed to make his way back to the Marquis of Death, and instead of just taking him out immediately, Doom disguised himself and pretended to be the Marquis' apprentice, just waiting for the moment when he could waltz up and completely slap the guy. Which he did after the Fantastic Four had brought the Marquis down a few levels. I mean, I can't argue that. Plus, think of all the times he delegated with his Doom bots. Number 3. Apocalypse. Some of you may not know just how powerful Apocalypse is. His mutant abilities are immortality and control over his molecular structure, which is pretty powerful. But then he was given a power buff when he interacted with a celestial spaceship and gained celestial armor and 2 different techno-organic viruses that turned into a benefit for himself. Now he can essentially grant himself any power that he wants. Superhuman strength, teleportation, telekinesis, flight, telepathy. He can produce force fields, energy blasts, absorb energy, and even grant power boosts and totally new powers to others. And that is part of the key point here. Apocalypse is famous for his horsemen, who he grants massive power boosts to be his henchmen, but also to enact his true purpose. See, the name of the game with Apocalypse is survival of the fittest, and the evolution of the mutant species. So, while he could completely obliterate the X-Men with his crazy level of power, like he did one time in the animated show, he prefers to send out his horsemen as a test against the X-Men to make sure they are truly powerful enough to carry on. But he's chilled out a bit on that front more recently. Number 2. Battle Beast. Now, some people may come for me, meaning Adam, here saying that Battle Beast is a hero. Some would agree that he is a villain. I'd say, or rather Adam would say, that Battle Beast fights for his own reasons on both sides, as long as it serves his goal. And what is that goal? Literally to pass on to the afterlife in a glorious honor-filled battle. He lives to find his equal and better in combat, so that they can bring the end of his life in an honorable battle. Honor is the key part here. During his fight against Thrag, the unfathomably strong leader of the Voltrumites, he recognizes Thrag's strength and the two go at it. Now, the Coalition of the World organized the use of the Ragnars, which are one of the only species of aliens who have proven strong enough to take down the Voltrumites. Battle Beast was told they would be released only if he failed to take down Thrag. So when they were released at the start of the fight and gave Thrag a massive wound, he was actually incredibly ticked off and decided to stop fighting Thrag and instead help him defeat the Ragnars so that they could have a fair fight. Which Thrag even remarks was stupid, but not only did he take away his own advantage, but he even injured himself in the same way Thrag had been injured, just so that he wouldn't have any unfair advantage. It's Sigma as hell, but incredibly foolish. Number 1. The Collector. Tanlier Tavon is an Elder of the Universe. He existed in the previous universe, and when it came to an end, he was the only one of his race chosen by the cosmic entity Death to be given immortality and survive in the new cosmos. As an Elder of the Universe, he is almost completely unkillable unless all his molecules are completely eradicated. While he looks like an old man, he has a second form where he gains powerhouse super strength, invulnerability, and cosmic energy manipulation for defense, offensive, and matter manipulation uses. But despite all that power, he time and time again does not use the full force of his power to trap and collect at least one of everything in the universe, including sentient beings. A lot of the time, he doesn't even go off to do these things himself, which he totally could. Instead, he'd rather let others do it. And I mean, when you have literally all the time in the universe at your disposal because you can't be stopped, then yeah, why do anything yourself? No need for urgency. I guess when you consider that the Collector could obliterate most people and only chooses not to so that he can collect them, he's a pretty good choice for the top spot.
Number 10. Dr. Fate. So here's the thing with Dr. Fate. Typically the character is not just one character, but two inhabiting one body. This is what the Helm of Fate actually represents. The connection of Dr. Fate to Nabu, the Lord of Order, which is where Kent Nelson originally got his powers and his knowledge from. Of course, Kent Nelson also has power separate from his appearance as Dr. Fate. He is, after all, a supremely skilled and knowledgeable magic user in his own right, thanks to years of training. However, with Dr. Fate really in essence being kinda two people combined, the Lord of Order Nabu and Nabu's host, in this case we're talking about Kent Nelson, these two do not always agree on how best to deal with an enemy or potentially catastrophic events. Case in point in Justice League Dark when Nabu takes control of Kent's body against his will, only for him to later be freed of Nabu's influence and refuse to basically use the power of the helm, instead choosing to keep Nabu trapped within it. Because Kent knows, well, if I try to work with Nabu, I'm probably gonna get possessed again. This guy's kinda being a little evil right now. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that subscribe? I know there are many of you that are not subscribed, so do it. Click the button. Do it. Number 9. Cyborg. In the Doom Patrol series, we literally saw just how powerful Cyborg is when it comes to using him as a pawn and manipulating him into attacking his own father. Mr. Nobody managed to trick Cyborg and ended up showing just how much potential he has when it comes to his ability to do harm. Cyborg actually would make probably a pretty great villain, to be honest, which is creepy. Cyborg in general usually has to be careful when fighting against enemies because he is super strong. In the comics and other media, he has also been portrayed as being in essence a master hacker, and as a result constantly decides to hold back rather than, just use his hacking skills to manipulate the world, which would kind of be, and sometimes that would be a little insidious. In the Snyder Cut, it's even alluded to that Cyborg is actually one of the most powerful people in the Justice League, with him being able to control all the banks and bank accounts of the world if he wanted. That's just part of what we get to see. Here he is shown as pretty much having access to everything technological, but being someone who chooses to use this power reluctantly and responsibly, because he is a hero. Honestly, when it comes to powerhouses in the comics who are capable of doing more, but choose to hold back, knowing that unleashing the full force of their power could be pretty dangerous, Cyborg is actually one of the best examples, even though some might not fully comprehend or accept him as the powerhouse he is. But Vic definitely deserves that.
Number 8. Uncle Marvel. Of all of the sidekicks of the original Captain Marvel, or Shazam if you prefer, Uncle Dudley is by far the most useless. While the other members of the Marvel family, like Mary Marvel and Captain Marvel Jr., get their powers from Billy Batson's hero persona and from the wizard Shazam, Dudley is actually a fraud with no powers to speak of. He isn't even actually their real uncle. He's just some old dude who decided to con his way into the family. While other members of the family will say their magic word and instantly be transformed into their hero selves, costume and all, Dudley will wait until no one is looking and then frantically tear off his clothes to reveal a homemade supersuit that he wears underneath. Everyone is aware of his lack of powers, but goes along with the charade because they think it's funny. Whenever he was asked to use his powers, he would complain that his Shazambago was acting up and that he couldn't do it right now but totally could some other time. So he has no powers and is really more of a liability than a help to the team, as he runs into danger with them and they constantly have to keep an eye on him to make sure he doesn't get horribly murdered, while they also deal with the supervillain. In fairness to Uncle Marvel, in the villain Black Adam's first appearance in Marvel Family number 1, it was Uncle Marvel who defeated him when the team was at a stalemate with the villain by suggesting that he be allowed to join the team, as he also had gotten his powers from the wizard Hashaz. No, I mean Shamhaz. This caused Black Adam to interrupt Dudley and fall into his trap by correcting him, saying, "You sputtering old fool, you mean Shazam!" causing him to be depowered and defeated by the Marvels. Number 7. Herbie. This character is proof that Marvel having to deal with weird rights issues is by no means a recent thing. In 1978, Marvel was trying to get an animated series based off of the Fantastic Four produced. However, they had already issued the rights to make a movie based off of the Human Torch to another company, and therefore could not use Johnny Storm in their series. Needing a new 4th member of the team, Stan Lee pitched the idea of a cute robot sidekick to round out the team, and he had Jack Kirby design Herbie in what would be Kirby's last contribution to Marvel Comics. Herbie was eventually brought into the comics, where he was created by Mr. Fantastic as a robot to help him search for Galactus. Unfortunately, a villain named Dr. Sun was able to transfer his intelligence into Herbie and could control the robot whenever he wanted, in efforts to sabotage the Fantastic Four, making Herbie a sleeper agent who was actually doing more harm to the team than good. Herbie eventually sacrificed himself to defeat Dr. Sun, but various Herbie robots have been built in the years since, for the purposes of general work and of acting as a nanny for Franklin Richards. After the Fantastic Four removed his inhibitor chip, Herbie lashed out, left, and joined the AI Army, a violent group working for the cause of robot liberation. Number 6. Moon Boy. So Devil Dinosaur is from the dinosaur world of Earth 78,411, who was captured by a tribe of creatures who killed his mother and siblings and then tried to burn him in an attempt to appease an erupting volcano. The volcano caught the young T-Rex in its fire and turned him red, and he became known as Devil Dinosaur. He was aided by an early hairy humanoid called Moon Boy, and the two became partners. Moon Boy doesn't really do much or bring much to the table, and spends a lot of time providing moral support from the sidelines. He is occasionally captured, but overall he doesn't get much to do. I mean, how much help can a monkey man really give to a T-Rex? Number 5. Jimmy Olsen. Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, is quite often more trouble than he's worth, with him often being kidnapped by aliens, sent back in time, or forced to marry a gorilla. He has such a tendency to get himself in trouble, Superman had to give him a signal watch that would let him know whenever Jimmy was in trouble. When you consider how many people need help from Superman at any given moment, it makes you wonder how many people have died needlessly in fires because Jimmy has been turned into a human porcupine and needs help. To be fair, Jimmy has saved Superman's life a few times over the years and has been given superpowers at various times over the years, which he has used to be an effective hero, but he does slow Superman down with his constant need to be rescued. Number 4. Dooby Dickles. Charles Dooby Dickles is an old school cab driver from Brooklyn who was the sidekick of the original Green Lantern, Alan Scott. His nickname is actually Derby after the hat he's always wearing, but his heavy accent makes him pronounce it Dooby. He was a skilled street fighter and a good driver with a love for his card, Goitrude. When acting as Alan Scott's sidekick, he would often wear a similar costume and be called Devastating Dooby. Now, having a chauffeur character to help you get around isn't that weird. Hell, it worked for Green Hornet. But Green Lantern can fly. So when he hangs out with Dooby, it's actually slowing him down. And it's not like Dooby is useful enough to justify the delay. He has no powers, he's just a normal dude who attacks people with a wrench. He left the planet for several years after an alien princess named Princess Ramia married him, and the pair ruled the planet Merg, or as he calls it, Moig. Number 3. Wendy and Marvin. When Hanna-Barbera adapted the heroes of the DC universe for the small screen in the animated Super Friends show, which featured Batman, Robin, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and Superman teaming up to fight crime, in an effort to give kids some characters to relate to and presumably forgetting that Robin was already a teenage superhero, the team was also saddled with 2 teenagers named Wendy and Marvin, and their dog, Wonder Dog. Wendy wasn't much help, and Marvin was a straight up idiot, but there they were, with no explanation, hanging out with the superheroes. As writers Timothy and Kevin Burke stated in their book, Saturday Morning Fever, Wendy and Marvin were the ultimate degenerate form of the kid's sidekick, about as useful to the Super Friends as a burst appendix. They existed primarily to be rescued and to help illustrate the moral message of the week. Wonder Dog was a Fred Silverman-inspired dog sidekick, part of the shameful lineage which would eventually result in a later incarnation of Spider-Man being burdened with a little white Yap Yap dog. Silverman and other Kidvid producers had an idée fixe that the presence of a dog inevitably made a cartoon attractive to kids. The pair were so useless that they were replaced by the Wonder Twins in the next incarnation of the Super Friends. Number 2. Alpha. Spider-Man was one of the first superheroes to prove that teenagers didn't have to just be sidekicks and could in fact be their own heroes, which is why it's kind of weird for him to get a teenage sidekick. Andy Maguire was a normal student at Midtown High, Peter Parker's old school. He was a painfully average student who was mostly ignored by his teachers, parents, and fellow students. One day, Peter Parker was presenting a demonstration at Horizon Labs, and an accident caused Andy to develop superpowers such as energy manipulation, force field projections, telekinesis, flight, and matter manipulation, among others. So, what's the problem? That sounds like a character who could somewhat keep up with Spidey. Well, he was such a bad sidekick that when Spider-Man brought him to try and help the Avengers battle Terminus, Alpha was so irresponsible with his powers that several aircraft began malfunctioning and plummeting to the ground. The Avengers and Spider-Man had to rescue all of the passengers, just barely being able to avoid a colossal body count. Spider-Man decided Alpha was too irresponsible to have superpowers and created a machine that took away Alpha's powers. Number 1. Snapper Carr. You may know that the Justice League was first introduced as an updated version of the Justice Society in 1960's Brave and the Bold number 28. You may know that the League consisted of 7 members: Aquaman, Batman, Green Lantern, The Flash, Wonder Woman, Superman, and Martian Manhunter. But do you remember the 8th member of the Justice League who was introduced in their first appearance? While developing the Justice League, DC executive editor Whitney Ellsworth insisted that the team have a hip-talkin' young teenage character who the young readers could relate to. Thus, Snapper Carr was created. He didn't have any powers and was a civilian who would constantly snap his fingers. As he explained it to the Flash in his first appearance, "You hear these fingers snapping, Flash? That's my way of showing I like something. That's why the cats around here call me Snapper." Flash decides to bring this young weirdo into battle because he may be the key to the League's success or failure against Starro the Conqueror. After Starro was defeated, he was made an honorary member of the League and was present for several of the stories in the team's first decade. As mentioned before, he does nothing except snap his fingers and was more team mascot than anything else. But as the sidekick of the entire League, he held them back in a massive way when he was tricked by the Joker into revealing the location of the League headquarters, forcing the League to spend valuable time relocating to a space satellite. Snapper was not allowed to come along. Snapper was briefly given teleportation powers in an effort to make him useful, but is a mostly forgotten character now. Number 10. The Specter. This spirit of vengeance in the DC universe first appeared in More Fun Comics number 52. He was originally a demon named Aztar who was helping Lucifer to try and take control of heaven. He eventually had a change of heart and surrendered to the Archangel Archangel Michael. As a means of atonement, his memory and consciousness were wiped, and he was transformed into the Specter. He is a divinely powered being, capable of almost anything he can imagine. He can travel between dimensions and can shoot energy blasts, is immortal and capable of flight, intangibility, possession, telepathy, and telekinesis, just to name a few of his powers. In order to temper this power, he must be bonded to a human host, with his most often host being Jim Corrigan. Specter has no limit to his power, but is bound by the morality of his host, who often prevents him from unleashing the full wrath of God upon his enemies. Number 9. Green Lantern. The Green Lantern Corps are a group of intergalactic space cops who are led by a group of aliens known as the Guardians of the Universe. They have used the green power of will to create a central power battery on the planet Oa, and to create power rings which recruit members to the Corps and allow them to protect their sectors by creating constructs of anything the wearer can imagine. One of the most powerful and famous Green Lanterns is Hal Jordan, who has created a lot of amazing constructs over the years. When his home, Coast City, was destroyed, Hal showed just how powerful the Green Lantern ring really was by using it to create constructs of the destroyed city and everyone in it for him to interact with when he mourned. However, when he did this, he was breaking the rules established by the Guardians, who forbid the use of the ring for personal gain. The Guardians immediately told him to report to Oa for disciplinary action, but Hal went nuts and went to war with the Green Lanterns. However, it is still a good example of how the power ring is potentially unlimited, but using its full power in an undesignated way can result in the ring being taken away by the Guardians, which I think makes this point apply to all of the various members of the Green Lantern Corps.
Number 8. Sunspot. Sunspot is one of my favorite heroes when it comes to those who have to hold their power back. I mean, at one point, his power was at risk of killing him, guys. After being shot in the head, he was forced to wear a headband to help regulate his powers, as he lost control of them, somewhat, and left unchecked, they could easily kill him. Sunspot's headband would regulate his powers, thereby protecting Roberto da Costa from being burned up from the inside out by literally holding back and balancing his powers for him. And we see just how necessary this is when Bobby, who at the time was known as Citizen V, decides to throw caution to the wind, removing his regulator headband to prove that he is indeed one of the most powerful mutants to have ever existed, while also obviously fighting to save the world by using his power to keep the world engine running, putting his life on the line. Number 7. Sentry. EJ Graham in the comments for the part 1 of this video was considering suggesting Sentry for a potential part 2. Ultimately though, he decided against suggesting that perhaps Sentry doesn't hold back, and instead often simply gets written out of Marvel Comics because he's too overpowered. I would argue that him both being written out / killed off because he's too powerful, and him having to hold back because he is too powerful, are actually both true. Sentry does every now and then go in guns a-blazing, with him ripping people in half kind of becoming a weird, every so often semi-regular occurrence. However, I will also say that more often than not, we've actually seen Sentry hold back his powers and express restraint, especially when you consider he agreed to wipe his own mind and the minds of everyone else on Earth of his superheroic existence just to protect them from the evil villain, the Void, who is basically Sentry's villainous alter ego he was made to believe that he'd always had after being brainwashed by Mastermind. Number 6. Wonder Woman. We have seen what happens when Wonder Woman stops holding back, and it's not pretty, I'm gonna tell you that. Whether we are talking about emotionally with her giving into a well of despair, or physically with her causing the mass destruction of the entire planet as a result of a fight against Superman. In Tales from the Dark Multiverse, War of the Gods, her giving in emotionally resulted in her being overtaken by Hecate, who she had previously trapped in her subconscious, initially preventing Hecate from possessing her. However, after the destruction of Themyscira and the death of her sisters, her fellow Amazons, and her mother, Diana ends up losing hope, and thereby loses control over herself. In Wonder Woman Dead Earth, we learn of how Wonder Woman giving into her rage and removing her bracelets, which in this story hold back Diana's power, results in the destruction of the planet. Even in the main continuity, it's actually been suggested that Diana is much more powerful than she lets on, and this is likely because without holding back, she could actually cause major damage and destruction to the world around her and people in it. Number 5. Storm. Storm has demonstrated restraint on multiple occasions when facing her enemies, and has proven time and time again how much of a badass she is in the comics. Recently, during the AXE Judgment Day event, Storm was one of the few people to survive Uranus' initial attack on planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars. This went down when Storm was the acting regent of Arakko, the planet and nation's leader. Storm is the only person I believe to have actually sat on both the Great Ring of Arakko and the Quiet Council of Krakoa at the same time, and she made this work for actually a pretty good while. In order to get her seat, she actually had to defeat the previous regent who held the seat of All Around Us, that's the name of the seat that she holds, Nameless, the shapeshifter queen. While Storm bested Nameless, she refused to kill her opponent, preferring to hold back and allow Nameless to live, forcing Nameless to actually curse Storm and choose to take their own life rather than simply admitting defeat. Number 4. Black Bolt. Black Bolt is a character who is so powerful, half the time just the threat of him using his power is enough to stop those who oppose him from basically messing with him. Black Bolt's power first manifested at birth, as his mother and father exposed him to Terrigenesis before he was even born as part of an experiment to see, kind of what that would do. This, along with his immensely powerful genetic makeup, resulted in him being born as one of the most powerful Inhumans ever. Black Bolt would end up being kept in isolation for most of his childhood and early life as a result of the sheer power that he possessed. He literally couldn't even just run around and be a kid. No, too powerful. His powers are related to the speech center of his brain and his ability to harness electrons. Using both, he possesses an extremely powerful voice, with just a whisper often being enough to harm those who stand against him. As it stands, Black Bolt usually communicates telepathically, although not psionic himself, or more often with his own specific form of sign language. Number 3. Icon. Icon has been shown to be even more powerful than Superman on occasion, with Superman at one point remarking that being hit by Icon was the hardest that he'd ever been hit. The two have fought multiple times against one another in the comics, even way back when Clark had his long hair. Oh, I miss his long, luscious locks. At one point they end up fighting in the 2006 Justice League of America series in issue 28, but here it's all a show. So there's no real victors since they are kind of just pretending to fight here. And we have to expect that Icon was holding back somewhat here. Sure, he wanted to make the fight appear convincing, but he didn't actually intend to hurt Superman, which implies that he wasn't even using his full force here, as he likely wouldn't need to go hard to sell a fight to onlookers. With that reasoning, not only have we literally seen Icon hold back, but it also means that the hero, now from DC's Milestone imprint, might actually have to hold back even more than some of the most powerful heroes from DC's mainline, which is pretty wild to consider. Number 2. Magic. Magic is a hero that often gets left out of lists like this, so I want to thank Michael Sheehan in the comments from our part 1 video for suggesting that I add her to this video. Truly, she is a superhero who constantly has to hold back, lest she threaten the existence of the world and possibly the universe. Magic isn't just a straight up hero, she's complicated. She also has a darker side known as Darkchild that she often has to keep contained. And that's what I love about her complexity. She also has a ton of trauma in her life that she constantly has to confront and deal with. Number 1. Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan has to be one of the ultimate heroes for needing to hold back. Dr. Manhattan is insanely powerful, and perhaps this is why he generally prefers to stay out of the affairs of mortal beings. Well, that and the fact that he likely doesn't much care for, humans. He is a reality warper, and in fact is one of the folks, I would argue, in current lore the main folk, responsible for the New 52 continuity reset. As such, Dr. Manhattan constantly holds back, despite the fact that he could reset the universe on the daily, destroy it, or completely fix everything. Instead of doing any of this stuff though, he prefers to take more of a watcher role, only getting involved when he really feels it's necessary or has some strong desire to do so, which isn't very often.
Number 10. Robin. Perhaps the most iconic sidekick in history is Robin the Boy Wonder, who is the young ward of Batman. Robin first appeared in 1940's Detective Comics number 38, less than a year after Batman was introduced. Taking inspiration from both Robin Hood and the Bird, Batman and Robin are as iconic and dynamic a duo as milk and cookies. The first and most well-known Robin is Dick Grayson, a former trapeze artist who was adopted by Batman after his parents were killed. Robin had a tendency in his earlier appearances to be constantly captured and needing to be rescued by Batman, an aspect of the character that was also present in his appearances in the 1960s Batman TV show, where he was played by Burt Ward. However, Dick Grayson and most of the other characters who have become Robin have since been written to be a valuable member of the team, rescuing Batman just as often as he rescues them. With the introduction of the third Robin, Tim Drake, it was also revealed that part of the reason that Robin is so important is that he brings a bit of light to Batman's Dark Crusade, preventing him from being too dark and depressing. So I guess Robin does hold Batman back, but in a good way. Number 9. Rick Jones. When Bruce Banner was testing his gamma bomb, a young teenager named Rick Jones drove out onto the test site on a dare, unaware that he was about to get hit in the blast. Banner rescued him but was hit by the gamma bomb and transformed into the Incredible Hulk. So right off the bat, Rick held back Banner from ever having a normal life. He became the Hulk's sidekick for many years, aiding the Green Goliath and more importantly, doing his best to hold back the Hulk from destroying everything in his path. He is also in frequent need of rescue, but did eventually become the gamma-powered hero known as Abe. Rick has also served as a sidekick to other Marvel heroes over the years, including Captain America and Captain Marvel.
Number 8. Batman. Batman is similar to Daredevil in the regard that he is one of the most gifted martial artists in the world and has extensive knowledge on how to handle any situation. Like Daredevil, he also has a strict moral code that prevents him from killing any of the criminals he faces, despite the fact that he certainly could with ease. For example, in Book 1 of The Dark Knight Returns, Batman is fighting against a group of thugs, and in his inner monologue, we can see him playing out strategies, saying, "There are 7 working defenses from this position. 3 of them disarm with minimal contact. 3 of them kill, and the other hurts." He, of course, chooses the option that hurts. But it is a good example of how, as a master strategist, in any situation, he is aware of how he could kill, but chooses not to. This is due to him not wanting to go down the path of his villains, and having a desire to see criminals reform, often hiring criminals who are let out of prison to work at Wayne Enterprises. So, like Daredevil, he has a strict moral code, but he is better than Daredevil at sticking to it, earning him the higher slot. Number 7. Thor. Thor is literally the god of thunder. He can bring down lightning, he can smash stuff with his hammer, and he is an amazing warrior with centuries of combat experience. In fact, he was so powerful and arrogant that his father, Odin, sent him to Earth in order to temper his power with humility. For those only familiar with movie Thor, in the comics, Odin sent Thor to Earth with no memories of his life as a god, and made him believe that he was a doctor with a bum leg named Donald Blake. As detailed in the character's first appearance in Journey into Mystery number 83, he spent a decade on Earth learning the value of hard work and perseverance as he dealt with his injured leg and set up his own medical practice. After this decade had passed, Odin implanted a message in Thor's subconscious telling him to go to Norway, where he found his hammer and regained his godly identity. I don't know if this is full-on holding his power back, but the fact that he went through all of that to learn humility and what it meant to be worthy of his powers shows that Thor is very aware of his powers and the proper way to use them. Number 6. Quake. Daisy Johnson is the daughter of the villain Mr. Hyde and a woman with the Inhuman gene. This resulted in her developing the ability to manipulate vibrations. She can use these for a variety of purposes, like causing earthquakes, hence the name Quake. She can also use these powers on a more micro level, such as when she took on the Omega-level mutant Magneto and managed to vibrate his brain until he fell unconscious in New Avengers number 20. On another occasion, when Wolverine was having one of his famous temper tantrums and attacked Nick Fury, she was able to use her vibration powers to cause his heart to explode. So, she has the power to take on some of the most notoriously dangerous characters in the Marvel Universe. In fact, she is so powerful that she actually needs to be really careful about how she uses her powers. Obviously, earthquakes can cause a huge amount of collateral damage, so she needs to be careful of that. But the best example of these powers left unchecked is from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. television show, where Glenn Talbot gets Quake's powers in an alternate timeline and uses them to destroy the planet. So, yeah, she needs to be careful. Number 5. Gambit. Remy LeBeau is a powerful and popular member of the X-Men with the ability to tap into an item's potential kinetic energy, making it a dangerous and explosive weapon. He most often uses smaller items like a deck of playing cards, which he will then throw at his enemies. The only real limit on these powers is that he needs to make direct skin contact with whatever item he's charging, hence the cool fingerless gloves. Oh, and also the amount of time it takes him to charge the object, with larger objects taking longer. He also has the ability to hypnotically charm people, making them more likely to do what he wants. Before he was a member of the X-Men, he was a master thief, but found that he was having trouble controlling his powers, causing him to seek out the help of Mr. Sinister, who gave Gambit a surgery, removing part of his brain in order to dampen his powers and make them more manageable. So, while there may be other heroes on this list who are more powerful, none of them took such extreme measures to hold themselves back for the safety of others. Number 4, Northstar.
Oh, Andrew, you talk about Alpha Flight on almost every list. Why don't you talk about more popular teams?
Well, I'll tell you, it's because they're awesome. And because I spent a lot of money collecting every appearance of Alpha Flight over the pandemic, including the issue in Volume 2 that features the first appearance of Big Hero 6, which was a real pain in the butt to find. And talking about them in a work video makes that a tax write-off. Plus, it's my list, and you're literally in my home right now, so I'm gonna talk about who I want to talk about. Jean-Paul Beaulier is the fastest mutant in the Marvel Universe, since Quicksilver isn't a mutant anymore. Northstar is capable of reaching incredible speeds when running or flying. He has a twin sister named Aurora, who is also fast and able to fly, but though she has a greater endurance than her brother, he is the faster of the two. In X-Factor Volume 4, Number 7, Northstar and fellow speedster Tommy Shepard are comparing top speeds, and JP reveals that his top speed is 189,299 miles per second, which makes him faster than the speed of light. But he has a very good reason for not reaching his full speed. As he explains to Tommy, that would destroy everything in my path. I could garrote the world in half with one lap if I wished it. It would destroy me physically, not emotionally. I can't breathe at that point because I've created a vacuum and my organs are getting crushed, my bones pulverized into dust. So yeah, Northstar is holding back for good reason. Number 3, Captain Atom. Captain Atom was originally a Charlton Comics character, the same way that Shazam used to be. DC Comics eventually purchased Charlton's collection of heroes, and as a result, he was introduced into the DC universe. In the DC retelling of his origin, Nathaniel Atom was a man sentenced to death for treason. He was offered the opportunity to instead sign up for an experiment designed to test the structural integrity of an alien metal. To test this, they placed Atom in a metal egg and then blasted it with a nuclear explosion. He was vaporized, but much like the Watchmen character he inspired, Dr. Manhattan, he was reconstituted with the metal now covering his skin. Captain Atom can tap into the quantum field and convert the energy into powerful blasts. He can also generate and manipulate matter, such as when he transformed Green Arrow's arrows into butterflies. Captain Atom has to be very careful with his powers, as he is essentially a walking nuke. When he uses his upper power levels, he will start to leak radiation, and if his metal skin is ruptured, he risks detonating like an atomic bomb and destroying whatever city he's in. Number 2, Scarlet Witch. So, Scarlet Witch is one of the most crazy powerful people in the Marvel Universe. One time, she was able to rewrite reality so that mutants were the dominant species on the planet and humans the minority. When Magneto ticked her off, she decided to rewrite reality again, taking away something like 99% of the world's mutant powers by simply saying, no more mutants. She could do that again anytime she wants. I really don't think I need to say anything else on the subject. Number 1, Spider-Man. When I was checking out the previous 2 videos that Amanda did on this subject, which you should of course check out because they're great and also not filmed in an apartment, but I was shocked to learn that Spider-Man didn't make the cut on either installment. So even though he may not be holding back as much as some of the others on this list, I decided to give him the top spot here. Spider-Man is a powerful hero, being able to climb walls, swing from webs, and use his spider sense to avoid danger. But what we're talking about here is his super strength. He can lift several tons at once, as he infamously did in Amazing Spider-Man number 33, when Dr. Octopus trapped him under loads of heavy machinery. But when you have that level of strength, and also have a rule against killing, you have to make sure you pull your punches to avoid taking someone's head off. This was discovered by Doc Ock when he took over Spider-Man's body and became the superior Spider-Man. In one of his first adventures as the new Spidey, Ock fought the Scorpion, and when he punched the Scorpion in the jaw flew clean off. As Doc put it, never knew this body held so much power. All these years, Parker must have been holding back. That really must have made him rethink every time Spider-Man punched him and how that could have turned out.